not to be confused with the Stanley Cup Final. It's the NBA Finals tonight. Pacers at the Thunder, and the Thunder are 9.5-point favorites. Tim MacMahon, ESPN reporter, and he's the author of The Wonder Boy, Luca Doncic and the Curse of Greatness, but he'll be covering the NBA Finals. Why is it the Stanley Cup Final and the NBA Finals, Tim?
Howdy, Dan. I am not qualified for any discussion regarding hockey, so I'm just going to focus purely on basketball. And
wait, this is just grammar, Tim. This isn't just.
Oh, also not qualified for grammar discussion.
As a writer, you're not qualified to talk about grammar?
Those are for editors.
Okay. Pacers are overwhelming underdogs, historically large underdogs. Why?
I mean, the simple reason is because the Thunder are really, really good. The Thunder are a team that won 68 games this regular season with the best point differential in NBA history. Obviously they were challenged by the Nuggets in the second round, but other than that, they've cruised through the playoffs. And I mean, they've had 4 30-plus point wins during the playoffs, something that's never happened in a single postseason run. I don't think it's a disrespect thing toward the Pacers. Obviously, look, the Pacers weren't a team that people expected to see in the finals. Got off to a slow start. They're a 4 seed. They earned their way here. But I look at the odds more as a nod to just how dominant the Thunder have been in any kind of knock against the Pacers.
I think a lot of this, though, is brand awareness, that we look at the Pacers. People didn't watch the Pacers. People are just, being introduced to the Pacers. And really the same thing for OKC. Because let's say I put the Knicks in there against OKC. Would it be, would the odds to win a championship be this large of a margin here? Would we factor in the Knicks, that somehow they're the Knicks, they'd have a better chance than the Pacers?
I mean, honestly, maybe only because of the way the money works in Vegas, but I don't think the Knicks would have had a better chance to beat the Thunder. I mean, the best team won that series in Indiana versus New York. That Knicks defense, that transition defense that was getting just obliterated by Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, was not going to stand up very well against the Thunder. Sloppy as the Knicks were with the ball, that was going to be a pretty big problem against the Thunder. So maybe the odds would have been better in the sense of gambling.
Yeah.
In the sense of actually having a chance to win the series, I would say absolutely not.
Tom Thibodeau was fired because
he is a polarizing figure internally. There was a pretty large faction within that front office that wanted to get him fired a while ago and finally got its way. If you're going to fire a coach after a conference finals run, if you're going to fire a coach who has made the playoffs 4 straight years and has had the success that Thibodeau's had for a franchise that's gone a quarter century without sniffing any kind of real success, you better get the next hire right. It's an awfully high bar that you're trying to clear with your next hire here. But, Tibbs got fired because Tibbs tends to wear people out, and he wore out a certain amount of people who were able to get their way.
Do you think they know who they're hiring?
I don't. I think they certainly have some strong ideas. Whether their targets are going to be attainable remains to be seen. But this is the kind of deal, honestly, where if you're going to fire Tibbs, it would make sense that you know who the next hire is. A boom boom type of thing. I certainly don't get that sense. But of course the Knicks keep you guessing, because why would you possibly consider having a press conference after making this kind of major franchise decision? Just hide in your little ivory tower and don't speak to the unwashed media masses. That's the last thing that you would want to do when you're going to make a decision to fire a coach in the wake of a conference finals run.
Yeah, and I'd gotten wind yesterday that I didn't know the acrimony inside, but then I was enlightened yesterday, and it's wild that you have. It's almost like he was winning his way into keeping his job. Would he have been fired if they went to the NBA Finals?
Who knows? But, it's funny that Tibbs makes an adjustment during the conference finals to use DeLon Wright, to use Landry Shamet, to kind of extend the rotation, and it works, and then it's used against him because it was like, see, you should have been playing these guys the whole season. See, you're so stubborn. You refused to do what we were trying to get you to do, and it was the right thing all along. So I don't know if he would have been fired if they'd have made the finals. Obviously, we'll never know. I just do know that it's not like this was out of nowhere. There had certainly been people who were trying to get Tibbs out of there for a while now, going back before the season even started.
Yeah, and you give him a contract extension last July. It's almost as if now, okay, this may sound crazy, and I was told this yesterday. What if Leon Rose, who was Tibbs's former agent, who's now his boss, wanted to take care of Tibbs, if in fact he got fired, that you get him this contract extension? Because why else would you give him a contract extension if there's already people in the building who do not like him and his style?
Yeah, and it is also one of those things where, when a coach is going into the last year of his contract, you either extend him or fire him. That's just kind of the way it is in the NBA. You can't have, or you can, but it's a really bad idea to have a guy that everybody knows is a lame duck as the head coach. But I see where you're going with that. I don't think it's a terrible conspiracy theory. Listen, I don't know that this was Leon Rose's decision. I know that publicly in the little short statement that they sent out that he accepted the responsibility for the decision. I think this was more a Dolan decision and, people working around Leon Rose. I do know that Leon Rose has held off the angry mob within the Knicks front office before. But again, they can say what they want in a statement. They don't have to have a press conference. They don't have to explain their decision. I just don't understand how that benefits the Knicks whatsoever to just leave people wondering what the hell is going on.
Tim MacMahon, ESPN NBA reporter. He'll be there tonight for SportsCenter. Also, the book, The Wonder Boy, Luca Doncic and the Curse of Greatness. The commissioner said yesterday on Fox Sports that he is entertaining the world versus the All-Stars from the United States. I'm wondering, we saw how important the Olympics were to Joker. And you, of course, wrote the book on Luca. Playing for the rest of the world as opposed to playing for your country in the Olympics, I'm curious about the pride you think that the team world would have against the United States.
Yeah, and this is certainly a way that they're trying to make the All-Star game more competitive. I can see that, but look at the All-Star rosters from last year. Is it going to be 18 on 6? Or are you just going to say, hey, sorry, Americans, but there's going to be 12 international All-Stars regardless of qualifications. You get 12 spots for the Americans, 12 for the world. And look, obviously the top-end talent, you know how many straight MVPs have been won by international players. There's no question that there are, a handful of international superstars. But I think this idea is half-baked if it's got to be even international versus world, regardless of who actually earns a trip to the All-Star game.
Well, it might be half-baked, but I know that the current format isn't baked at all. It doesn't even get in the oven. Like at least okay. I'm preheating here for something.
Well, yeah, and then you get into the discussion of, okay, is the All-Star game to honor the best players in the league that season, or is it an entertainment showcase? It's funny. I feel like the NBA All-Star game is the only one that people really whine and cry about the competitive nature. Like, what I don't even know what they're doing in the Pro Bowl now. Is it like flag football or something? Like, seriously, I don't know, but nobody cares, right? This idea that it's some kind of a crisis because guys aren't diving on the floor for loose balls during the All-Star game. I don't really understand it. Then again, I'm a guy who I cash in my airline miles and hotel points to take my wife on vacation every All-Star weekend. So what do I care?
Okay, but do you think that if Kobe was playing or Mike was playing or Larry Magic playing today, would the All-Star game look the way the All-Star game looks?
I mean, it's a fair point. I just think it gets way too much like attention and concern, and like there are bigger problems in the NBA than, hey, the All-Star game is just guys like dunking the ball and jacking up 40-footers. Like, to me, if we're worried about the competitive nature of the NBA, let's start with the fact that even though you've flattened the lottery odds and it blew up in some teams' faces, that you've still got Tankapalooza down the stretch of a regular season. I'm much more worried about the competitive nature of March and early April basketball than I am some weekend in a random city in February.
I was watching you guys on the podcast yesterday and the Hoop Collective, and you guys were talking about Utah, where Danny Ainge's son is now going to run the Utah Jazz. And, he spent, 14 years with the Celtics. But he was asked about, basically, are you going to tank, this upcoming season? He said, no, not this season. As if it probably happened last season and it just didn't work out. So he's kind of admitting, I think they tanked last year, but we're not going to tank this year.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be hot in Texas this summer. I'm going to go ahead and admit that. Some things are just plain as day. They absolutely tanked last year. And what Austin Ainge said, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but basically what he said is we're not going to be manipulating minutes to lose games this year. They're not going to be inventing injuries. I mean, their injury report, if you opened it up on your phone, you had to scroll down a few screens on a regular basis. It was ridiculous. And they were fine for tanking. Like, they blatantly tanked, got the worst record in the league, and ended up in the most likely scenario, which was the 5th overall pick, which was both the worst case and most likely scenario. And then you get into, I know within that franchise, there's discussions about, hey, the way we approach this season, like tanking, you hear the euphemism for player development, but what they did, you're stunning the growth of young players on the roster.
Yeah.
These guys need to be put in situations where they're playing to win the game. If you're trying to develop players, so you're just punting on the growth of, they had 7 guys under 23 years old. And then your odds aren't that much better for the number 1 pick than if you finish 6th or 7th or with a 6th or 7th worst record. Now, the wiggle room that he left is they're not going to do that, but let's see what their transactions look like. They just very well could have a roster next year going into it where, look, they're going to play as hard as they can. They're going to try to win games, and they're going to end up, 22-60 or whatever, be pretty close to the same situation. That, my guess is it probably ends up looking something like that.
More likely the series goes 4 games or 7 games?
I mean, I think that the data would tell you 4 games. I'm just going to say I don't think a Rick Carlisle team's getting swept. And, Rick Carlisle has outcoached a legendary coach in the finals before, a legendary young coach, right? A guy who became a legend. Eric Spoelstra's, that Miami Heat super team's first finals. The Dallas Mavericks did not have the better team. They were playing better at the time, but Rick Carlisle cooked up some magic during that series, and his coaching staff. But I'm just saying, I know that Mark Daigneault expects to have his hands full with the coaching matchup, and I think that is the Pacers' best chance to make this a real series. And I say that out of with a ton of respect for Daigneault, who's been a coach of the year, who's done an unbelievable job in Oklahoma City. But Rick Carlisle is as good as it gets in terms of game to game, even half to half in-game adjustments during the playoff series.
How many Air Jordans did you pack?
Let's see. I think there are 8 Jordans, some Air Force Ones, a pair of Blazers, and some good old trusty Stan Smiths just for the everyday kick run shoes. Also have some Sabrina ones, Daniel. Appreciate this. We've got a pickup run here in OKC, a Friday night pickup run, and I'm told there will be another one in Indy. So I packed my Sabrina ones. I can't wear current NBA signature shoes, but I can certainly support the WNBA.
We didn't play against each other, did we? I don't think you were covering the NBA when the Bulls in the 90s?
No, I was playing high school basketball back then.
Oh, because we used to play pickup and with the media. So I remember Jackie McMullen was on my team, and remember playing against Rick Bucher. And
we'll have a pickup run. I also packed some Icy Hot, so we'll be ready to roll.
Who is the best media basketball player?
You're talking to him. No, I'm just kidding. There's
Are you the Joker? Are you?
Depending on the day and the competition, I'm somewhere on the Zaza Pachulia the Joker spectrum. It's a wide spectrum. There's the pick and watch is certainly a big part of my game.
Okay, all right. Where would Stephen A. Smith be picked if there was a media pickup game?
I don't know. He's welcome to show up on Friday night and find out, though. I've seen the man take some jumpers in dress shirts, but I've never seen him play.
He might not get picked.
Oh yeah, he'd get picked.
You
He'd
think?
get he'd
Yeah.
get picked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say you asked the best media guy. It's Chris Haynes is in that conversation. He played college football. But the thing about Haynes is his version of a pass is a missed jump shot. And I've got a feeling that Stephen A would be similar in that regard.
Yeah. And Peter Vessey's too old to play anymore. Because
Now we've got some dudes though. We got now. I'll give a shout out. There's a dude, Daniel Bell, who's a local radio guy here in OKC. About 6'2", 220, a decade and a half younger than me. He's been my matchup during the conference finals. This dude hit like 6 Dirk one-leggers from the mid-range in my face in a row. Listen, I am not like I've always said the most overrated thing about sports is sportsmanship. And if you watch me play old man pickup with my 2-inch vertical, it's reflected in my performance and my disposition.
can Brian Windhorst play?
Windhorst, I think he's going to have movie night on Friday night instead of coming. Bontemps claims he's going to get out there, but he's one of those guys. When a dude shows up in running shoes for the pickup run, he's got no game.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Have fun tonight.
Appreciate it.
That's Tim MacMahon, ESPN NBA reporter, Band MacMahon podcast on the Hoop Collective, and the author of The Wonder Boy, Luca Doncic, and The Curse of Greatness.